This episode of Dorking Out is brought to you by Clampett Oil, with offices in Houston, Dallas, and Beverly Hills.
And the letter I, because you can't spell iTunes without I. Have you reviewed us on iTunes yet? You should review us on iTunes. Unless you have something bad to say, then you should keep your goddamn mouth shut. You hear me?
Houston, flight is go.
Mila, let's go.
From Assignment X, Amalgamated Storytelling, and thesoniashow.com, it's The Dorking Out Show with Christopher Allen Smith and Sonia Mansfield.
Welcome to episode 60 of Dorking Out, a podcast for people who like to dork out about stories and the stories and pop culture that we love. That means movies and TV, sometimes books and podcasts, and everywhere else we find stories that interest us or you. This is the Riots of Detroit and the Bastard of King's Landing edition. With me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and nerd author, Christopher Allen Smith.
Hey there, how you doing?
Hello. And
with me today is professional writer and author of The Sonia Show, a flash fiction blog based on the life of Anthony Scaramucci. Sonia Mansfield.
It's true.
It is. Flash fiction's the best.
It used to be called The Mooch Show.
That's right, for 15 glorious minutes.
Yes.
Sonia thought she had backed the right
winner.
Yep. 5 years of writing about Anthony Scaramucci had finally paid off. That was fast.
So sad.
On this week's show, we are talking about Kathryn Bigelow's new movie, Detroit, about the riots, the Algiers Motel incident. It's a searing adult drama about race, police, the changes in American society of the 1960s, and one that has an all too timely feel today, especially this weekend. Holy smokes.
Yep.
We also use this as a jumping off point to talk about adult dramas and wonder if they're still a thing when it comes to movies. Then we're talking about a provocative piece by The Guardian's Danny Leigh, which asks the question, is Hollywood in desperate need of a Bonnie and Clyde moment? More on that in segment 2. It's a good thing to listen to. Then we wrap up with our old pal, Peter Brown, the associate editor of Assignment X, as we do our status check segment on, what else? Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 5, Eastwatch. All of that and not more. That's it. That's all we're doing.
That's plenty.
All of that when we come back.
Hey, want more Dorking Out?
Yep.
You can visit our website at dorkingoutshow.com.
You can.
And you can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Do you listen to us on iTunes?
Yep.
It's cool.
It's cool.
We won't tell anyone.
Nope.
Please, take a few minutes out of your busy day of pretending to work while you watch cat videos to give us a review on iTunes.
Cat videos!
For some reason, iTunes really cares about reviews, and it helps us attract more listeners, and you want us to have more listeners and be popular and cool, don't you?
Yep.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
And now, on with the show.
Yeah.
Topic 1. Is there a movie more timely playing in theaters right now than Detroit? Directed by Kathryn Bigelow and written by Mark Ball, who previously worked together on The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, Detroit tells, I wrote the wrong word here, tells the true story.
Tells the story.
I'm sorry to snicker during something so serious. Detroit tells the true story of the Algiers Motel incident, which happened during the 12th Street riot in 1967 Detroit. The police raided the Algiers Motel believing there was a sniper and then proceeded to beat and torture 9 people, including 7 African-American men and 2 white women, almost all of them teenagers. Eventually, it ended with 3 of the teenagers being killed by police. The film stars Algie Smith, I hope I pronounced that right, John Bodega, Will Poulter, Jason Mitchell, and Anthony Mackie. The movie's about race and police brutality. And after everything that happened this weekend in Charlottesville and the acquittal after acquittal of police officers and the murder of black men, this movie is set in 1967, but it really could be set right now. It's very timely. Smith, what did you think of Detroit?
Ugh. It was, it's funny. There are movies like this that come along every once in a while.
Detroit is funny. It's hilarious. Okay, everyone.
I did not say that. Oh, you
hilarious.
Cool your jets. Holy smokes. It's every once in a while a movie comes along that takes on a big subject, takes a big swing on it, lands enough that you want to watch it and you're glad you watched it, and it really, uses movies to kind of their fullest extent in terms of introducing people to worlds that they may or may not ever experience and get them to feel empathy for people they may or may not ever even meet. But once you've seen the movie, it's like, thank you, I got it. I don't need to watch that ever again. Holy smokes, that was a rough, horroring ride. This is a really good, really important, really well-made movie that definitely has flaws. I don't think any of them rise to the level of being significant flaws, but what Kathryn Bigelow has done in getting the audience into the kind of the hallway of the Algiers Hotel and watching police brutality play out in a exceedingly convincing and frighteningly plausible, almost mini horror film, as I've heard it described several times, was very affecting, really good, really sad, and I really liked it. The movie's kind of the beginning and the end, I think, do have kind of some flaws and some difficulties where they kind of have to truncate down. When you're taking on a subject like police brutality, African American experience at the hand of police in America, the '60s, you're spinning all of these plates,
right?
And you have to spin them all in 2 hours and make it all connect together. That's a really rough.
That's a tall order.
That's a tall order, and it's funny. When I was watching it, I was feeling like, wow, this is an adult movie. Like, they don't really make as much as they used to. And when I was watching this, I was thinking, man, this used to be a subject that we kind of wrestled with a little bit more. Or maybe I just was a big fan of Spike Lee back in his heyday. And I kind of miss big movies that examine all the different facets of race and racial healing and racial strife and racial difficulty, in a big, meaty way. I really think this is a movie that people should see. I think it's important, but it's also, especially this weekend, it's one that we really should watch, but I don't want to make it sound like, oh, you go, go and watch this movie and eat your vegetables. And I mean, it's a really good movie, but it's like, it's kind of, like, it's a little bit reminded me a little bit of Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List, which is, all of the things that I said, but it's not like, oh yeah, the next time Schindler's List is on TNT, I'm just going to sit down halfway through and start watching. No.
Right.
This is not that kind of movie, but I still think it shows that sometimes movies are able to steal back a little bit of the thunder that television dramas have taken in recent years. But that's a lot of me rambling about it. Sonia, what did you think about it?
You liked this movie a lot more than I did. Now, full disclosure, I actually saw this movie on Saturday while everything was kind of going down in Charlottesville, and I was not in the mood for this movie. And Smith and I got into like a text war, and I was really pushing back because I was like, "Can't I go see Atomic Blonde instead?" And
No, because
you're
you
the
told
one who put this on the agenda, Mansfield. Get in the theater.
And I've already seen it, so you're seeing it too, honey.
Yeah, so
I wrote that. I wrote honey.
I will fully admit that, like, maybe that is when I should see a movie like this. My problems with the movie aren't. It's not story related. Let me just, I feel like there's the hour in the hotel is this really intense, like almost like just like torture to watch, and the brutality is really hard to watch and hard to stomach. But there's a lot of stuff at the beginning and a lot of stuff at the end that's just not tight. Like, it's not a tight movie.
Right.
It doesn't have like a really smooth narrative flow. Like, you compare it to like Schindler's List, and I was actually thinking a lot of Dunkirk when I was watching it, where it was kind of telling like 3 or 4 different stories that kind of all come together at the hotel, but it was doing it at the beginning in such a meandering way that I didn't know like who we were going to be following, and so once again, and I hate saying this stuff over, I feel like I say it a lot when we talk about movies, but because they chose not to spend a lot of time with people before we get to the hotel, it was hard for me to connect with anybody. So I just felt like, from a story point of view, like, I realize it's a true story. I don't want anyone to think I'm crapping all over the story. Like, that's not it. I feel like it needed to be narrowed down on whose story they were trying to tell, maybe.
Right.
Would help me with the movie. Because it really, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
The beginning and the end.
Yeah.
Like, there's some things with the police and, how they're kind of overreacting to things. One of the cops actually shoots a looter, and they're like, "You're totally going to be charged with murder." Well, get back out on the street.
Yeah. Until we come get you, go do your job.
Yeah. So I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So that's happening. Then there's like this story of the Motown band, the Dramatics, and whether or not they get to perform, and how the guy really, the lead singer really wants to perform, and is he going to perform? And that kind of plays out again at the end. And I was like, well, the stuff with the band, like, doesn't really matter to me that much. And it was just very strange. And then there's like all this stuff going on with John Bodega's character, where he's a security guard.
I believe it's Boyega.
Oh, how did I pronounce it? Did I pronounce it Bodega?
Every time tonight you have pronounced it Bodega.
Oh,
John,
my gosh.
I am John 7-Eleven. He is.
I'm really sorry. I am so awful at people's names. People should just accept this about me. His character is a security guard who works at the bodega. No, he...
Actually, he is protecting kind of a bodega, now that I think about it.
Kind of teams up with the police and the National Guard and stuff in a good, like, he has a noble intention there.
Yeah.
But like, his story isn't told very well, so it was like even hard to connect with him. I just have a lot of problems with the movie. And then, like I said, that part in the hotel is really intense, and it is really scary, and it's very timely. Like, this stuff is happening now. It's, so you kind of leave the movie thinking like, hey, good news, everyone. 50 years later, nothing's changed. Whee!
Right.
Like, it's kind of a bummer. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I have like a lot of other things I could say, but I don't think I need to get too specific about my issues. But there is like a whole thing about the police, like, they're looking for a gun, and there isn't a gun, but there is a starter pistol. And why none of these people just say, there was a starter pistol, you're mistaken.
Oh, I think we know why. I hear what you're saying. I've actually heard this critique brought up a little bit.
So my problem with it is it. All right, I'm going to be very careful. There's a lot of there's a lot of people that when they see these videos that are out there now of these cops that are killing like unarmed black men, they're like, well, if these men would have just cooperated,
right,
and you do exactly what the police say, you'll be fine, which is not the case. But that's their argument.
Well, that's the thing that's
I'm
so
not saying,
intransigent about this movie. Actually, is sometimes you'll be fine, but sometimes you won't, and you can't as an African American. And I think this movie shows is you're in that position where the cops are coming down on you, and it could be the bad cop or the good cop, and you can't know because they all have their boot on your neck to a certain extent. And that's kind of where the horror comes from. But I'm sorry.
So
keep going.
I feel like this movie isn't for me. Like, I'm already kind of on the side. Like, I'm already on the side of, yes, this is wrong. This is messed up.
Right.
I feel like this movie has a good message. Like, it wants to be, hey, police brutality happened then. It's still happening now.
Right.
Here's a story about how it happened. But by leaving out the part where like they don't say like there was a starter pistol, it makes it look like they're not cooperating, and it gives like the people who say that sort of thing just that little bit of ammunition to say, well, they should have just said that there was a starter pistol, like somehow you deserve it.
Nah, I hear what you're saying. I feel like I got to push back a little bit.
I'm not agreeing with that.
No, I know. I don't think that was kind of like a mistake by Kathryn Bigelow to kind of, open up a loophole for these people to kind of charge through. I think that was a deliberate choice because once you're in, once we see the characters in the hotel and they're faced with that choice, the African Americans and the white women both make the choice. It's because it becomes clear by that point, and that this is why it's such a tricky issue and why this is so good, is it becomes clear by that point that no answer is going to satisfy these guys.
Yeah.
When cops get to this.
Absolutely, because ultimately it was coming down to something else entirely. Yeah. It wasn't about what you were saying.
And when I was watching it and I'm thinking about this, I wouldn't have said one word because it was obvious. It becomes obvious, and we've all had these encounters in our lives where somebody comes up to us or pushes us or looks or is incredibly angry or something, and you can tell, and they're kind of demanding information from you, and you can tell they're just praying that you put a foot wrong in something you phrase or say the wrong thing because that will give them the excuse to do what they want to do anyway.
Right. You're talking about me, right?
That's right. And they were. That was laced throughout this movie, but there's a lot of. One of the things I really liked about this is there are a lot of questions about police brutality, and one of the things I want to do is be very careful and not just say, "Oh, this is a movie about how police are brutal," blah blah blah. Definitely, it is, but it does, and I think it portrays things in a realistic enough way, especially with John Boyega's character. Where
you mean John Bodega?
Yeah, there are arenas that society asks security officers or police or National Guard or sheriffs or whatever to charge into, and they have to go into these awful situations without all of the information, and they have to make split-second decisions about how to act and what to do before they have time to get the information. And which is interesting because we see John Boyega, and he's a security officer that actually kind of connects up with the National Guard in this. And then when this starter pistol gets shot out the window, from his point of view and from the National Guard's point of view, there, because there were snipers, reported in the area and whatever. From their point of view, somebody really was shooting. So when they charge into this hotel, they are legitimately looking for somebody who was shooting because they heard the gunshots.
Right.
So then when they happen on the bad cops, and the bad cops say, oh, this guy came down and he had a knife and he went for my gun. There was no video camera. There was no whatever. We see John Boyega essentially agree with this, racist cop, but we see why he would do it. We see, and which kind of illustrates all just the quagmire of complexities and difficulties that even well-meaning people with training trying to do the right thing can dip into stuff. And it's fascinating. It's not just they used to make movies back in the 50s and 60s called, social pictures where, like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner or Asphalt Jungle or, a lot of these. I think you could say that 12 Angry Men was one of these things where they take an issue and they get a little bit black and white about it and they get a little simplistic about it. And it makes makes people feel good or makes people feel a certain way. But they were very simplified versions of these difficult societal questions. This, I think, is pretty clear on the dangers and who the bad guys are and who the good guys are without...
The police officers are, they're almost like twirling a mustache.
They're
couple
almost
of like,
that's the thing is, yes, a couple of them are, but a couple of them are not. And that's actually one area where I want to definitely agree with you in that this is my new sterling example of how dramas like this need to be a 10-episode Netflix or HBO or FX series. This needs everything that was wrong with this movie boiled down to they didn't have enough time. So what you would get is after one of the characters gets out of the Algiers Hotel, he runs into some other cops and he's all beaten up and scared and messed up. And they don't really have time to show that these are not bad cops or whatever because they're actually trying to help this guy. So you hear one of the cops say, "Oh my God, who would do such a thing to a human?" It's just this very tin pan, very...
Oh, totally.
We need to show that this cop's a good cop, but we only have one sentence to do it.
Right.
What can we have him say? So he says this thing, and we can see that he's helping this guy out.
He might as well have said, like, I'll help you. I'm a good cop.
Exactly. It's just like, oh, God. And then there's another instance where one of these other cops, after the incident, tries to escape when he realizes the heat's coming down. And literally one of his supervisors comes out to the squad car, says, hey, you racist cop, like turn off the engine and get out. And it's just like, really? I don't think, even though that this supervisor's heart was in the right place, even though he was doing the right thing, I don't think he would talk like that.
Yeah, nobody talks like that.
Exactly. And it was...
I do think you're right, though. I think this would have... I actually think this... There's two things here. First of all, this movie's 2 hours and 20 minutes long. Right. And I was like, to me, it felt like 3.5 hours long. Like, this movie was... the movie felt too long.
Right.
To me. Like, and maybe they needed to cut up the beginning and cut up the end, because like I said, it really meanders in there. But that, like, hour in the hotel's really tense and really tight. But this would have benefited from a Netflix or an FX or an HBO limited series or something that gives us a little bit more insight.
Right.
A little bit more context. Like, there's a lot of drama here, but not a lot of insight.
I would disagree.
I felt,
but
I feel like we needed more context, and that's why like OJ's Made in America was so amazing.
Yeah,
it gave you, like, you really understood, like, here's what happened before, and this is why OJ was a big deal, and here's what happened. So it was so good at like laying it all out for you, like this is why, this happened, and this is why this happened.
Yeah, this is why Los Angeles was on edge. This is why everybody reacted to the police like this. Yeah.
I think this movie wanted to do that. I think it was trying to do that at the beginning, but there was like kind of like some animation stuff at the beginning to kind of explain that.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
It was trying to explain African American people moved to Detroit, to the industrial area to get jobs, and then all the white people left for suburbs, and and then there's anger, and it's like, well, why are people angry? I mean, we know why, but they don't tell you why. Like a little bit of context, and I just felt like it needed more of that.
Yeah.
And I felt like it needed more. Like I said, there was just there's a lot of drama there, but I just needed like a little bit more context, I guess.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's one of those weird movies where the beginning and the end was pretty long in relation to the center of the movie, but it also at the same time felt kind of rushed and hurried and didn't give you enough. So it was kind of cut down too much to make this movie kind of a really top-notch, really top-level delivery of this. But it was, but it didn't give you enough to kind of really get it, because I think one of the things that why I'm really liking this movie and like enough of this movie is because it's trying to do something really difficult that we always say, oh, this is too, we always talk about, oh, we need a discussion on race in this country and we need a discussion on this. And we rarely get it. We rarely get it from Hollywood, despite all their protestations. And this movie really shows, like when the Black Lives Matter thing blows up and there are people chanting Black Lives Matter to a certain part of America that seems kind of like an understandable but kind of a strange way to phrase this problem. And when you see this, you understand the Black lives here didn't matter at all. And you could see the cops do this kind of stuff and walk away from it. And if you're an African American living in an era where that is happening, you have to make different decisions when it comes to law enforcement, even if you're a law-abiding citizen, even if you want to do the right thing, even if you want to push towards progress. The practical day-to-day headache of dealing with this kind of stuff is really laid out great in this. And I think that is one of the things that I would have liked to see is an episode or two of whatever 10-part series talking about, watching this case, quote unquote, fall apart, or watching how you can be a cop to go through this, watch the cops kind of get away with it, and then watch the people that have to deal with it and what that does to. That is one of the things I liked about his name is escaping me, the lead singer of the Dramatics that kind of goes off on a different path at the end of this movie, is because he has been on this journey. In order for him to deal with it, it's heartbreaking, and it would have been great to have an episode to really watch his thought process. And that is one of the things, when you and I were going back and forth about this, and it's last week we talked about Confederate, and this week we're talking about it's two white people talking about race and all this stuff. And I made a joke in our text back and forth, which is, we don't want our show to be the Charlie Rose show, where the only time he brings African Americans on is when they're talking about race. And every other subject is, nope, here's a bunch more white dudes talking about it. And this is the thing that I think where Spike Lee really gets run down, because he makes these movies and he does these things, but the people that really need to have the conversation about how to deal with race in this country are white people. And that, there's some criticism of Kathryn Bigelow and Mark Bolas, and this is a white crew making a movie about race in America. But I got to step back and say, no, that's, you know, African Americans don't need a movie telling them or talking to them about the problems of race in the country. There needs to be more empathy. There needs to be more understanding. There needs to be more examples like this. And that's one of the things that movies do so well is it brings the viewer, in this case, I would say largely white viewers, into the shoes of other people and makes them understand the difficulties. That's why I think this...
Well, I think some of those Nazis in Charlottesville should see this movie so they could see what real oppression is.
No. Those guys are lost. Those guys are traitors. Those guys are. We don't.
Fact.
Yeah, we're not gonna save their souls. You know, they're just gonna have to die off. I'm talking about, you know, the vast middle swath that needs to hear this. But that is our review of Detroit. Sony Mansfield.
I do want to say too, the performances in the movie are really, really great.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a super fan of the movie. It didn't all work for me, but there is like an hour in there that's really intense, you know, really well done, and the performances are pretty great.
So, 2 questions. One, what's your number?
What's your number?
I'm gonna give this somewhere between a 7 and an 8. So, depending, I could go.
See,
4,
I'm a full on like a 5.
Okay, yeah, I think this is much too good for a 5. I think this is, but I hear what you're saying.
I feel like this is half a good movie.
Okay,
5.
Then let me ask you this. Then,
yeah,
dramas, adult dramas. You know,
Yeah.
back when we were young. You know, there would be, you know, half of the year would be dedicated towards essentially grown-ups, quote-unquote grown-ups, going to see grown-up movies. You know, there was, you know, more movies that I could shake a stick at. There was the Gandhis, there was the Reds, there was the Terms of Endearment, there was, you know, Mississippi Burning, there was most of Spike Lee's movies. You know, this whole swath of movies that they don't really make anymore. We've had this ongoing discussion about, well, does all of that stuff live better on cable?
right.
And I think I am definitely of the opinion that as much as I like this movie, this would have been better served as a story as a cable show.
I think so too.
Is this kind of like, are we saying that movie dramas are kind of done and they are best left to cable? Or is there a place for kind of the grown-up Oscar-type drama?
No, I think there's still a place for them. I just think this story in particular would have benefited from a longer storytelling platform. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry, my mind wandered there.
That's right. Why would you like to be a police officer? To serve the people and help
stuff.
them and stuff. There goes the next chief of police. You know what? We're not gonna give you the quote. That's a little police related quote from a movie, and we're not gonna tell you what it is. You're just gonna. There goes the next chief of police. Google that.
What's the last like really good like adult drama you saw? I don't want to say adult movie, adult drama that you've seen, do you think?
You know,
like does Moonlight count? Is that
it does and it
you
doesn't.
know?
The problem that I have with Moonlight is it is such a tiny movie.
Right.
And that's the thing that's the thing that I'm really feeling the loss of with this movie. There was a time when studios would sink kind of a lot of money into historical dramas and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you could have a big historical scope and tell a relatively, not huge and epic, but a pretty big historical movie or big drama. And, like Deer Hunter or, Gandhi,
Right.
I think I said, or, there's Out of Africa or
I mean,
whatever.
does Dunkirk count?
Yeah, but Dunkirk is it does, but it's such a weird anomaly because of the blockbuster status of Christopher Nolan, and I think
Right.
it was such a miss. Like, it counts as a movie, but I don't know. Let me look. Moonlight is it's kind of like, yeah, it's technically a drama, and it's technically a movie, but that's
But
almost
it wasn't a big budget movie. It was like a little indie,
yeah.
you know.
And so it's kind of like the kind of drama that this movie is. Watching this has kind of showed me, man, they just don't make movies like this that much anymore. Let's see. Let me look back. I would say, like Kathryn Bigelow, she's still doing it, which I love. She's still, Zero Dark 30, for all the problems that people have with that. That was a fantastic movie. Hurt Locker, I wasn't as much of a fan of. Let me look here. So,
Well, she made Point Break, so she's always okay in my book.
Exactly. She could do whatever. Yeah, Fences. Fences was good. Hidden Figures, good. Founder, that was good, but it was not, Oh, Hell or High Water. That's it. But that's kind of a.
But those are all last year.
That's a
like
genre
nothing
movie.
really this year, right?
Not yet, and that's one of the things is I think. I think Hollywood has become so ridiculous. They've taken all of their good Oscar movies, and it used to be they started at September 1st. That's when they started. Then it got compressed to October, then December, and now I feel like big dramas, they come out for 1 week in limited release at the end of December, and then then we might get to see them sometime in January or February. So yeah, you know what? There's not a lot for stuff that I've seen, and maybe it's just that I am more into genre type movies these days. There's not a lot of, The Martian doesn't really count. Black Mass, that was good. Heart of the Sea, kind of a misfire. Concussion, it was fine. Big Short, that counts. That was good.
Room,
which I did not see. What I'm doing now,
which I love.
Yeah, which I am looking at my Letterboxd rated movies. Bridge of Spies, I thought that was a pretty fantastic drama, but it's that's the kind of thing. Is there used to be 5 or 10 attempts at a Bridge of Spies type movie every year, and now there's maybe 1 or 2, maybe 1 a year. You can't really count Hateful Eight. Yeah, Joy with Jennifer Lawrence, I think, was kind of a misfire. Selma, but yeah, now we're back in 2015. 2014! Right. Holy smokes! Man, I don't see nearly as many movies as I think. All right, so I guess we've made a decision.
Yes.
Put this on cable.
Yeah. You're welcome, Hollywood.
You're welcome, Hollywood! Now, on to the next topic. So for the past few years now, film lovers and movie critics have commented on the rise of the genre film, how wannabe blockbusters have broken out of the summer and are seemingly eating up every month on the movie calendar, and how movies don't seem to get any love anymore unless there's some comic book connection to it. I myself think this is a kind of golden age, but I understand the frustration. Movies have become very predictable and stale, and have more or less lost their preeminence as the most valuable real estate in pop culture storytelling. So goes this theory. But to quote Battlestar Galactica, this has all happened before, and it will all happen again. 50 years ago, the studio system was dying. Big movies after big movies were coming out and bombing bad. Back then, those movies weren't wannabe blockbusters or comic book movies. They were big biblical movies, big musicals, and big westerns, essentially the comic book movie fads of their day. Then along came a little movie called Bonnie and Clyde, starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway of the Moonlight debacle fame earlier this year. You younger listeners may know them from that. And that movie, Bonnie and Clyde, started a revolution in American filmmaking, the new wave filmmakers, leading to So the argument goes that I happen to agree with, to the golden age of director-centered movies in the 1970s. You know, if it weren't for Bonnie and Clyde and this new young energy in filmmaking back in the 60s, we wouldn't have Coppola's The Godfather, we wouldn't have Scorsese's Taxi Driver, we wouldn't have Spielberg's Jaws, we wouldn't have Lucas's Star Wars, and on and on and on. Essentially, Bonnie and Clyde blew up the old status quo and made way for new blood in Hollywood. Is Hollywood ripe for a new Bonnie and Clyde in 2017? And if so, what would it look like today? That is the provocative question we're talking about, with a nod, more than a little bit of a nod, to Danny Leigh's article in The Guardian this week's, which got us thinking. Bored bad blockbusters, why Hollywood needs another Bonnie and Clyde. Sonia Mansfield, does Hollywood need another Bonnie and Clyde to shake things up and shock Hollywood into a new way of thinking?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, next topic. Yes, they do. Like, it's exactly what you said. Like, every movie is kind of a big action. It's a big action movie or a comic book movie, and gone are kind of the smaller, scrappier, more daring movies. You know, I think this year we've seen Get Out came out, and I think that kind of like blew people's minds. It was a much smaller horror movie, and I'm kind of wondering if that's where you're going to see the next Bonnie and Clyde. Is it going to come in like a kind of an unusual genre? Like not an indie movie.
Yeah.
Like kind of what happened in the 90s.
Yeah.
Because I would say in the 90s it was probably like Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, like Pulp Fiction.
Right? Or Pulp
Tarantino.
Fiction.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean there's I was gonna say Rebel. Yeah. There's a couple of books on it. It's like Rebels on the Backlot.
Yeah.
And it's all about like these guys in the 90s who kind of did the same thing that Lucas and Coppola and all of them did in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the next Bonnie and Clyde, will it come in the form of like something like Moonlight, or will it come in the form of something like Get Out? Yeah. Like, will it be like maybe like a horror movie or a sci-fi movie, like something different, not more mainstream, I guess.
Yeah. You know what? That's not a bad theory, because, you know, one of the big movies was, or the big books about this subject that I think David Leigh jumps off a lot on was Peter Biskind's Easy Riders and Raging Bulls, which is an insanely good, one of the best movies about Hollywood and Hollywood filmmaking, talking about this era of filmmaking and how Bonnie and Clyde really kicked off, you know, a crazy revolution. And it's funny now that you're talking about, because I feel like every 20 or 30 years, Hollywood gets into a certain kind of rhythm, a certain kind of rut.
Yeah.
That some interesting new different filmmaker comes along and kicks the doors open. In the 90s, it was definitely Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
Taking a genre, the crime genre, which was kind of kicked around and not thought of as very, you know, a very good place to really express the best kind of art that movies can do. And he was, you know, like a live wire. It was watching those, you know, there are some kinds of movies that when you go to see them, you can feel something is changing as you're watching it. Like, it is like this, it does, you know, it's definitely the old movie cliche. It's like, this kind of changes the world around it. You know, you walk in, you sit down, watch Pulp Fiction, and when you leave the theater, it's a different movie-making world.
Right.
But Bonnie and Clyde kind of did that. They took this old, you know, beaten-up gangster picture genre that Warner's did back in the 30s, and they did something new and young and interesting with it. but it was, really high art filmmaking at the time. And I do think it's interesting, your idea of it coming from like a horror genre. Like, I think Get Out, but does Get Out, that's a good question. I guess we're going to have to wait a year or two to figure out if Get Out inspired and a lot of the filmmakers working now to go in a different direction. Like, I really like that movie. I was really into it, but I'm wondering if it's got this flip the table over kind of aspect to it. That beyond just being a really good movie that people like.
Right. Well, I think that, I don't know. I mean, we really won't know until 2 years from now, probably, if Get Out was the one that kicked the door open.
Right.
And I'm not an expert. I was just kind of pulling that one out of air, as something that's really great, really different, and telling a really different story in a interesting way that we're not seeing. And when I was reading the article that you sent, and they talk a lot about Easy Riders and Raging Bulls, it made me think of basically the 90s version of that, which was Spike, Mike, Slackers, and Dykes. Did you ever read that one?
No, I didn't.
And it talks about, because I read that one a long time ago, when it came out, and it talks a lot about independent film and the different, how it was Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It, Michael Moore, Kevin Smith's Clerks, and kind of telling these stories that weren't being told.
Right.
So it's about the African American experience, or with Michael Moore's Roger and Me, it was about the working class people.
Working class
and Kevin Smith's people was kind of this young, I don't want to say losers, but kind of people that don't have it all together, that don't go to college, that those kind of those people telling different kinds of stories. And so it wasn't necessarily super innovative filmmaking so much as revolutionary storytelling, just because it wasn't about
right,
I don't know, white men, I guess.
Well,
I don't know, because
I don't know.
I mean, Roger and Me and Clerks are kind of about white guys, but I mean,
so is Pulp Fiction. So is
right.
So is Reservoir Dogs.
Pulp Fiction really is. And then, like I said, there's another book that came out, I think, a little bit later, and that one's Rebels on the Backlot, and that one's a lot about Quentin Tarantino and Paul Anderson and Spike Jonze and stuff like that. Right. And I mean, Pulp Fiction was the movie that totally kicked down the doors when it came. Do you remember how many Pulp Fiction ripoffs there were?
All of them. Yes, I do. I spent
every movie for 2 years was a Pulp Fiction ripoff.
I spent the majority of my life as a working entertainment journalist chasing Pulp Fiction ripoffs. One of my crowning achievements was writing a review. I believe it was for Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Joe Carnahan's Pulp Fiction ripoff. And boy, it was the only time I got an email from a director, and holy smokes, he was pissed off. Oh my God. He was mad at me. I wish I had saved it. I did not. So
that movie really did change everything, because that's the same year that Forrest Gump came out. And I was working at a movie theater that year. And when Forrest Gump came out, I still love Forrest Gump, by the way. I will defend that movie.
Oh, I'll defend it to the death.
And I remember everyone I know saw Forrest Gump and they all loved it. Loved it.
Yep.
And then they saw Pulp Fiction. And all of a sudden, Forrest Gump was crap. And that Pulp Fiction was, that one was the new hotness or whatever. Yeah. And I mean, literally, it was it changed how all these people perceived Hollywood movies, quote unquote Hollywood movies. They went from legit loving Forrest Gump to walking out going, well, that was stupid crap. Pulp Fiction's it, man. Every movie should be like this.
Exactly. Well, you know what those people are, Sonia? They're posers. Those people are posers. If you really love film, you can love Forrest Gump and, believe it or not, Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, you can love two movies at the same time.
That's right.
It's awesome. But I'm like, so we're talking about like, what's the next one? What's the next Bonnie and Clyde? What's the next Pulp Fiction? Like, you know, I threw out Get Out. I don't know if Get Out's like that movie, like where people walk out and they're like, damn, every movie should be like Get Out.
Yeah. You know,
but I like the idea of it telling like different stories in a cool way.
I am sensing that there's kind of a problem because I think one of the last times is, you know, Quentin Tarantino definitely did this, but we don't have any filmmakers like Spike Lee around anymore. I know that we talked a little bit about Spike in the last segment, but nobody is coming out with a movie and where you go into the movie. Like I remember watching, like being 3/4 of the way through Do the Right Thing, and it was like, holy smokes, this movie,
right?
This one's going in a direction I've never seen. I mean, it was very electrifying, very dangerous, and in movies that have the courage or whatever to really kind of rattle the audience. Mm-hmm. You know, that was the crazy thing about Bonnie and Clyde is you were kind of rooting for the bad guys, which was a new experience at that time. I mean, that's pop culture these days, but back then it was like, wow, you know, the bad guys are sexier and cooler than the good guys.
Well, that's why I was saying that maybe the next big thing, the next thing that's going to kick down the door would come from like some sort of horror genre, because they're not afraid to mess with you.
Yeah. You know.
They're not afraid to go somewhere dark, you know?
You know,
I also think it has to do with technology too. I mean, in the 90s, it got easier for people to make their own movies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think now, even with like iPhones and how amazing the cameras are on them, I think you know,
right.
It could be we're going to see more and more of these different kinds of stories because they're easier to shoot, more affordable to shoot.
Right.
Like I think there was a movie last year, or the year before, that was, or a couple of movies I think that have been shot on iPhones.
That, you know what?
That look pretty awesome, apparently, from what I've read. I haven't seen them yet, but
here's the thing: as a professional video producer, don't make movies on your iPhone. Hire a pro.
Down with this sort of thing, you guys.
I've heard this whole I can just do it on my iPhone kind of thing. No, you can't. And has anyone seen any of these movies? Yes, we've all heard about them. It's all been the thing that they use to get attention to their movies.
I heard some of these movies are good.
I'm sure they're fine, I guess, maybe. But anyway, no. I'm with Christopher
Sorry
Nolan
to upset you. I'm not trying to upset you.
No, now I'm going to go full film. I'm dropping video. I'm going full film. Christopher Nolan, forget iPhones. Christopher Nolan's right. It's all got to be on film. Big crews, big movies. But you bring up an interesting point in that for the last 10 years, definitely for the last 5 years, digital technology has been so fantastic when it comes to putting Hollywood level type tools for an affordable price into the hands of filmmakers all across the country. So you would expect a huge crop of really good independent movies now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I have taken my eye off the ball. I will completely own up to not being super interested in that area of the market, but also kind of the mid-range independent movies have evaporated. They're just not around. Or I'm not seeing them, I'm not connecting with them in the same way that I have before. And I'm wondering if it's kind of like, where are all these movies? You know, I agree 100% when it comes to technology, there should be tons of these movies out there, and I'm not seeing any.
Maybe they're all on YouTube.
Maybe.
Isn't that where the kids go these days?
That is where the kids go these days. And I'm wondering I really liked Get Out, but I'm beginning to think it's, when Spike Lee was doing his most interesting work, he was really young. Quentin Tarantino, he was really young. The Bonnie and Clyde, all pretty young filmmakers. Easy Rider, which I think is an incredibly overrated film, but that was when the baby boomers were first starting to get into filmmaking, all really young. That's leading me to think that if we're going to have a new Bonnie and Clyde, a new movie that kicks in the doors and changes the way everybody thinks, it's got to come from a filmmaker that we probably haven't seen yet. Part of me is thinking like Edgar Wright might be that kind of person. But, Edgar Wright is using his talents to make a car chase movie, which I'd liked, but he's not changing the game. And maybe that's something a little unfair. It's kind of like, where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? We're looking for somebody, but they're just not coming. We're not getting it. And we need to accept it and live with it.
Or maybe we're not looking in the right places.
Maybe. I'm thinking, I'm hoping
like maybe these movies aren't coming to theaters. Maybe they're going straight to VOD, or maybe they are on YouTube. But then the question is how do you find these movies? Like,
yeah,
And we're constantly reading stuff all the time about movies, and it's we don't know about them.
Yeah, we're in a sea of pop culture, and maybe this is my bias, but from my point of view, if you want to be a movie, you have to come out in the theaters in some significant way. VOD, playing in one theater somewhere and then going on VOD or going on YouTube or something. I mean, I was a huge proponent of YouTube back when it first started, and I thought that might be the future of entertainment. And in some ways it is. Some ways YouTube has unlocked the door to a vast new arena of filmed entertainment, but it's not, even the best YouTube video does not do what a really good top-notch film does. They just right. Or for me, they just don't do it. So crap.
But maybe it's because we're old-fashioned. Maybe these movies on YouTube do it for kids, and I guess they're not kids, people in their 20s, the ages we were when we saw Pulp Fiction.
True. But I think it would be fair to say that for a film lover, a 40-year-old film lover in the 90s, you see Pulp Fiction and it has an impact. It might not be exactly your cup of tea, but you can see the artistry and the impact and whatever. If something like that were hidden on YouTube, we would have heard about it. It would have bubbled up to the top. And, listeners, if you know of any Pulp Fiction, Bonnie and Clyde class video on YouTube that we are ignorant of, let us know. Send us a tweet.
Yeah, we'd love to hear it.
Tell us. I'm suspecting the reason we're not hearing that dog bark is because it's not there. So yeah, now that we're chewing this over and thinking through all these, I guess we just have to. My takeaway is we just have to wait. Hopefully, there's some new young filmmaker out there that's going to do something cool.
Until then, we have The Last Jedi.
It's funny because part of me wants to say, no, that's just a bunch of corporate blah, 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 blah. That's just a symptom of the problem. But then the other part of me says, yeah, it's a new Star Wars movie.
Star Wars!
We're living in a paradise where we get a new Star Wars movie every year. Who could complain about that? Not me. All right.
Not me.
All right. Is there anything else we would like to say on this subject?
No, let's get on to Game of Thrones.
that brings us to our status check segment of Dorking Out. We are currently deep in the middle of Season 7 of Game of Thrones. Episode 5 aired a mere several hours ago. Eastwatch, to take the show description from the Game of Thrones wiki, Daenerys demands loyalty from the surviving Lannister soldiers. Jon heeds Bran's warning about the White Walkers on the move. Cersei vows to vanquish anyone or anything that stands in her way, which also, I think we had this problem last week. That is a line that could be applied to every single episode of Game of Thrones since episode 1.
Yes.
Yep.
Anyway, joining us is Peter Brown, the associate editor of Assignment X, and our our favorite fan fiction author of Game of Thrones.
Hey, I didn't bring it up first. Everybody drink.
You know what? Here's the thing: is the more this season goes on, I have to ask you, Peter. I need you to level with me.
Yeah.
Are you, in fact, a writer on Game of Thrones? Are you one of the writers in that writer's room? Because, holy cow, you had this nailed from the start.
Yeah, sadly, no, because I would be living a lot better than I am today. So, no, sadly, no. No, I am not. But, yeah, it does seem to be getting a little closer to reality, huh? She's making goo-goo guys at him.
Yeah, she is.
Yes, she is.
And he at her and her dragon.
It's too bad they're related.
Wah, wah. That doesn't stop anyone in Game of Thrones.
Doesn't stop anybody.
So, what did you think of this? What did you think of this episode?
I really liked it a lot, actually. I know it didn't have the kind of epic battle that we got last week. And I guess you kind of have to expect that they're probably going to tone it down a little bit this week, especially considering usually the second to the last episode of the season is kind of a blockbuster usually in Game of Thrones. So I was kind of already expecting this to be kind of a toned down, kind of more of a plot setting episode. And that's kind of what it was. But I liked it a lot. I thought it was really good. It had a lot of really good moments, from them all teaming up at the end, which was great. The Hound and Jon Snow together? Come on, are you kidding me? Hell yeah! Like you could ask for, and Beric, the dude with the flaming sword. Like, what more can you ask for? Like, seriously, that's like fan service at its best, right there. So I liked it a lot. Like, what do you guys think of it?
Sonia?
I think every episode this season has been like a little reward for watching all the previous season. Like every episode, I'm like, gosh, this show's so good. I'm so glad I kept watching it. Like every season or every episode, just like another thing clicks into place. Like just, hey, remember that guy that we followed around for like an entire season and then you never saw again? Guess who's back? Click, and
right.
Then like something else clicks into play. Click, click. Like the gears are all like coming together, to I feel like I've just been so rewarded with this show. And I love this episode. I love the like moments of levity that Davos brings.
Yes.
Like he's the new Tyrion, basically. Like
he's so awesome. In this episode, like how awesome he is.
Right.
Yeah, I love, it's so nice to kind of break up how serious it is with, a line or two that just lightens the mood a little bit. I was happy to see, was his name Gentry? Did I get that right?
Gendry.
I was glad to see him back. And I like that, of course, like he's like, don't tell anyone who you are. And immediately he's like telling everybody who he is.
Right.
What did you guys think about how this episode kind of just picks up right after the last one and Jaime and Bronn are like totally fine? Did you feel like that was a cheat or no?
No, I didn't. But I did feel like, wow, why did I think these guys were going to die? Like, as soon as I sat down and started watching it, and as soon as I saw him sinking into the thing, it was it was just like, why did I think they were going to kill him off like this? Or why did I think they might kill him off like this? I mean, I guess maybe they would, but no, I felt it was not too much of a cheat. It was enough to believe that they sank really far down, swam, and just got the hell out of there. Especially like if I think if any one of us was underwater and there was a dragon blowing fire right above us, we would figure out a way to hold our breath for a little while longer.
Yeah.
Hey, Peter, what do you think? Is this the equivalent of Glenn hiding under the dumpster?
No, not at all. You know why? Because I don't think anybody thought that Jamie was actually dead from that.
Right.
I really, if they did, it's probably just a few people. But like I said last week, I think he's got a greater role to play that, and I think that I think they would give him a proper send off too, based on like kind of his popularity on the show. And I think that would be kind of a cop out just to kind of kill him that way. So I pretty much figured he would make a return this episode.
Yeah. So
Smith, what did you think of the episode?
First, hold on. Let's just I gotta draw a circle around the little bit of Walking Dead trivia that you threw out there. Sonia Mansfield, are you a secret, closeted Walking Dead viewer? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, I just remember everybody freaking out about that, and I'm pretty sure we talked to Peter about it on the show or on the pop show.
Yes,
that's why I remember.
I don't listen to this show, so.
What show?
I thought this was fantastic. I thought this was really good, and the thing that. And I think we might have talked a little bit about this last week, is, the shape of a Game of Thrones season is usually it kind of gets going. It lays a lot of groundwork at the beginning. There's an episode somewhere around episode 4 or 5 that keeps people interested and gives them some answers and has a cool battle or somebody gets killed or whatever. Then it lays a little bit more groundwork. And then at the end, episode, of a 10-episode season, episode 7 or 8 is really good. Episode 9 is insane. And then episode 10 is really good, but not as insane as 9. For me, this season, it's kind of like the end of a season for the whole show. It's all of the groundwork that they've laid in all of the seasons is all now starting to come back together and cinch tighter and tighter and tighter. It was really satisfying. I think a lot of people had a lot of fantasies about what it would be like when Daenerys and Jon finally met.
Peter.
And it is really satisfying to see them not fall into the trope or the situation of how, watching two people in a throne room scheming silently on how to cut the other's throat. You know what I mean? These are these are good people who are in a difficult position trying to figure their way around it. Because we've seen how Daenerys treats people that she thinks doesn't give her the proper respect or doesn't bend the knee to her quickly. And with Jon, she's not like that at all. Like, she's really... It's kind of like they both want to solve this problem. I think Jon would like to say, look, I'm not going to submit to you, but you're never going to have a problem from me. I'm going to go back north. I will never leave the north. I will rule up there, But, officially I can't say that I'm not king of the north, but unofficially, don't worry about me. I mean, he can't really say that. And officially, she can't let somebody with pretensions of ruling, get away with not showing her the proper obedience if she's going to be ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. But I think she would be fine just letting him go to the north, deal with the wall, deal with all that. And it's just sweet to see. And it was fantastic to see Jorah Mormont come back, and that little moment that Jorah and Jon have as Jon was talking to her about stuff, and then Jorah shows up, and it's kind of like, who are you, dude? Who are you, dude? My wife was kind of pointing that out as, what are you smelling around for? What are you doing? And it's just this very high school, I don't want to say playground, but, high school type, sizing each other up and kind of like, you meet somebody for the first time and you already don't like them, even though you really don't know why.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really fun, and it's interesting to see. Like when we finally get to see, when they go up to the wall, they meet the Hound, and they all realize, yes, we all hate each other, we all want to kill each other.
Yeah.
But we're able to put all. Actually, yeah. Now that I think about it, that's almost. Anyway, there's that scene where they find the Hound in prison in Eastwatch. Everybody in that room has a reason to want to kill somebody else in the room.
Right.
They all have reasons to scheme and punish and do stuff, but they all don't, which is a very un-Game of Thrones like thing. They all decide to work together for the good of the whole. It's kind of like they're earning the right to lead by example rather than by birth, which is kind of where this whole. I feel like this whole series, it's pretty obvious this whole series is going in that direction now. And I thought it was very moving and very touching and very interesting. And I was really liking it, even though it was kind of a smaller kind of episode.
Yeah. And I agree with you about how they've handled Daenerys and Jon meeting. Definitely. They've done it in a smart way in terms of they're both not really caving to each other, and they both, realize that they are not enemies, and that in some respects they should definitely work together. And they're kind of putting olive branches to get out there to do that. And I think that's kind of smart considering, what they've all been through. But they both realize that, hey, they're both fighting for the greater good. They both can bring something to the table, and they're not going to be like a Cersei or whoever else. They're somebody different. So
Right. So actually, there is one thing that's kind of blowing up that I think we might have buried the lead a little bit. When Sam's wife, Gilly, was reading through stuff as he was studying, she seems to have uncovered a pretty big blockbuster change in our understanding of who these people are. When she was asking about the annulment, and then she describes Prince Rhaegar of House Targaryen had his marriage annulled, and he married someone else at a secret ceremony in Dorne, which, correct me if I'm wrong, that means that Jon Snow is not a bastard, but he is the true heir of the Targaryen house. So his claim on the Iron Throne by birth, if we're going to go down that road, is now more prominent than Daenerys. So,
I don't know about that, but okay, keep going.
Well, no, but that's the thing is if Prince Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark were truly married, and he was, he was the heir. He had a son. He dies. The only reason Daenerys has a claim to the throne is because he never had any kids that were, Daenerys' brother Rhaegar never had any kids. But if he did have a kid, that kid is the one with the, the claim to the throne by birth. So I don't know if this is.
Are you saying that just because he's a male? Is that why you're saying that? Because she is the direct descendant of the Mad King.
True.
Whereas Jon is an offspring of one of the direct descendants.
Yeah, but Jon is the offspring of the firstborn of the direct descendants. Mm-hmm. So that, if I understand anything about the rights of succession, and as a true American, I don't, because we don't believe in the monarchy. I think I've decoded this correctly. And that Jon should
it's hard to keep straight.
But that's the thing.
And the only one who actually even knows that of that is Bran.
Right.
Bran is the only one that actually knows that.
Yeah, maybe Bran needs to start kicking some of his knowledge out.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Ned Stark knew that, but he's dead, obviously. So right. Bran is the only one who actually knows Jon Snow's true heritage.
Well, you know what? I got to tell you, I am sure Because the thing that was so great about this scene where Gilly is reading the annulment stuff and she's kind of leafing through this book and kind of annoying Sam with just all these factoids she's throwing out is like she throws this huge game changer out. And he's, like a lot of husbands, so annoyed that he's not listening when he should be listening. And I have a suspicion that he's going to be halfway back to the wall and then realize, oh my God, what was that you read? And then he's going to have to truck back and get the book, and we'll see.
So here's an interesting thing too, is that when Daenerys returns and she lands Drogon next to Jon, like Jon goes up to him and he is okay with it.
Yeah.
He like, does Drogon or the dragons like know a Targaryen just by like their smell?
I think they do.
Or something like that, because it certainly seemed like he kind of knew that he was something, because we haven't seen a dragon be nice to anybody.
Exactly.
Except Tyrion.
Except Tyrion, right? I was gonna say, except for Tyrion, who they let him unchain them.
Right.
And that kind of brings together that other theory that's out there of the three dragons, right?
Right.
That there's three surviving Targaryen members. One's Daenerys, obviously. One's Jon Snow, obviously now, and the third is Tyrion, and that he was actually not a Lannister. He was a secret pregnancy from one of the Targaryens, and that's why he's so different. And so that would kind of bring that together, that the three heads of the dragon. So it'd be interesting if they actually explore that, to see if they will bring that all together, like the three Targaryen siblings coming together and saving Westeros.
Yeah, that would be nuts. I mean, I would hate to think. Yeah, I feel as though this has been laid down, and it was funny because it was almost as though you could see the screenwriters circling this entire scene in a yellow highlighter. It's like, pay attention to this. We're spending 10 minutes or 5 minutes of this valuable Game of Thrones final season's real estate on this seemingly throwaway line. Yeah, I think this is going to obviously come back in a pretty crazy and big way.
Hey, what did you guys think of Cersei's big news?
Oh, that's right.
I thought immediately that it was a ruse to keep Jaime on her side.
Also wondered that.
Because he's kind of already shifting his allegiance in some way. He's going behind her back, even though she knew that. And he knows that things are bleak. He knows that they can't really compete against Daenerys, so he's kind of looking for ways for them to survive it. And so Cersei wants to burn the house down and everybody in it, if she can. And so the one way to keep him on her side is to, hey, we have another child on the way.
Yeah, another bundle of joy.
Yeah.
I'm sure this kid will be super nice, you guys.
That's right.
Well, the other two didn't seem too bad.
I guess that's true.
That's right. Tomlin was all right.
That's
Tomlin
true.
Seemed okay. He was a little susceptible to influence, but
yeah, I also wondered if she was faking it.
You know what? Yeah. I guess I am just a trusting soul, because that thought didn't even cross my mind. And now that you're saying it, yes, that is definitely an evil, scheming, conniving play.
It's
that
she could totally do.
That she could totally do. So,
and speaking of conniving plays, Littlefinger,
yes,
setting up Arya to maybe take the fall here of some sort.
Now, do you know? I had a hard time reading what the note was that she supposedly found. What was that? What was that supposed to be?
I couldn't read it either.
All right.
It's signed by Sansa, so I couldn't read it either. But I think he's trying to make it look like Sansa's making a play for the throne, or to be king of the north, not king of the north, but queen of the north,
right,
or something, so that Arya will kind of turn against her. I think he's trying to turn the sisters against each other, is what I took it as.
Yeah, that's kind of how I took it too.
Right.
Because he knows, he wants to be like Sansa's main man. And, he can't have Arya hanging around.
That's true. I agree with you. I don't think that's going to work. I think Sansa is going to be really pissed at her sister. She's going to think it through. So I've too much blood and death. I've had enough of this. I'm not, even though I'm having a beef with her, I'm not going to kill my own sister. We're not.
Well, I don't think
Lannister's
kill her
here, for Christ's
sister,
sake.
but I think he's just trying to split them up.
No, he is. So I could see this backfiring pretty significantly. And this is how Littlefinger meets his end, by crossing Sansa one last time.
It was a good little cat and mouse, though, because they were, she was in the shadows or whatever. It turns out he's just as good at doing that as she is.
Right.
Maybe better.
Well, it could be the White Walkers kill everyone except Littlefinger. He would still survive somehow.
God, wouldn't that be?
That's our alternate ending, right? Littlefinger on the throne, right?
Right.
At some point, we have to have a discussion about what would be the most frustrating end to Game of Thrones. But
everybody dies and the White Walkers win.
That's
the
up
most
there.
Frustrating?
You know what? I suspect White Walkers is number 2. Number 1 would be some sort of out of left field time travel aliens arrive insanity that would put us.
What if Joffrey's one of the White Walkers and he somehow gets back on the throne?
Oh my God, that would kind of be awesome.
That would be terrible.
All right, so I have a question. So I watched the scenes from next week's Game of Thrones.
Yep, I did too.
And it looked like the band of brothers going up past the wall, Jon and the Hound and everybody, they're going to have some trouble. My question is, now, I floated a theory based on a theory I heard on the Ringer podcast, The Watch, that next week, important people are going to get killed off.
Yeah.
Alan Taylor, one of the big Game of Thrones directors, is coming back to direct this single episode of the rest of Game of Thrones. It's the second to last episode of the season, which is usually when stuff gets nuts. So the question is, do they have the balls to kill Jon twice?
No. Jon won't die.
Okay.
In that,
what do you think?
He won't die in that episode. He might die like sacrificing himself or something, but he's not going to die in that episode. I think that would be too much.
I think Dany's going to ride in on her dragons.
Maybe.
Why not?
I think there's a lot of people that are going that are known characters. The Hound, Gendry, Jorah Mormont, Tormund, obviously Jon Snow, Beric, the Red Wizard guy. So I mean, that's a lot of people that are up for getting removed here. I think Beric probably is gone, and maybe the Red Wizard guy. Maybe the Hound. I don't know. Maybe he goes down.
Hound. I feel like the Hound and Arya are gonna cross paths again.
That would be sweet. Holy smokes, that would be sweet.
But
I feel like they are.
Would they bring back Gendry like for one episode just to kill him off in the next one? Maybe.
Maybe. That's true. Yeah. All right. So, does anyone else have anything left to say about Season 7, Episode 5 of Game of Thrones?
I can't wait for next week's episode. I'm excited.
Peter?
Yeah. Nope, I have nothing else to say.
All right. Well, that's how you end an episode. Join us next week when we talk about other stuff. Sonia Mansfield, is there anything else you'd like to say at all about anything before we close this show out?
I'll just say goodbye.
Thank you for joining us, Peter. I probably should have said that first. And bye!
The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can find Chris at Jet Jurgens and Sonia at The Sonia Show. You can read about Sonia's random adventures at thesoniashow.com, and track the slow and creeping progress of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjurgens.com. You can find out more about the Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com. While you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on iTunes. We have a handy-dandy iTunes link to whisk you right back to 2007, where you can leave your review and 5-star rating in iTunes. We'd do it for your podcast. Want to dork out even more? Well, you can sign up for our newsletter, where you'll get all the headlines we use as fuel for the show. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening.